All right, everybody, here is your exam 3 run through. Thanks for being good on this one. My face is not feeling very good. I got a lot of poison oak. I was doing some work outside, and it just like poison ivy, it doesn't take much to get it on your arms and legs and face, and it's awful. So that being aside, your exam is on Thursday. I'll put it up live at 9:30, just like your class starts, and you have until the end of the day, a couple hours. It's only 41 questions. Some of them are 2 points each. Um, there are three very easy questions about modern money that we've talked about a number of times, so that shouldn't be an issue at all. And so let's just go from there. Okay, so first half of the test is on monetary policy. And I mean, I wrote these questions to be really, really straightforward. Okay. So if it says no, okay, then you know that that's going to be related to a list. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, the first statement is pretty straightforward. Money is anything accepted as a medium of exchange. Yes. Okay. Also, we go to the next one. Good money. What are those functions? It acts as a store of wealth. It acts as a medium of exchange, and it acts as a unit of account. Okay, so when you see those, you'll know that if all three are shown, then you know that that'll be the right selection. Well, I guess even in my video, we have to hear my clock. What is a liquidity property of money? Okay, it's that it's fungible. Okay, in other words, that it's generally accepted. Okay, fiat money. This is money that has no commodity behind it. There's no gold behind it. The government promises to pay the value that they declare as its worth. Okay, so it's money that is guaranteed by a government, but is not backed by any other type of. It's not backed by anything else. Okay, why is the U.S. dollar fiat money? Again, because there is no gold standard, and there is no promise to pay anything but $1 for a dollar, for example. Okay, legal tender. This is what you see on your bills. It simply means that it can settle all private and public debts. Okay, so people will accept it, and people will take it to clear any type of established contract, IOUs, or anything that's basically they say, hey, you owe me, they'll take it. Okay, and also you can pay your taxes on it. Oh, wow, this is an easy one. What is the name of the U.S. Central Bank? I hope you know that at this point that is the Federal Reserve. Okay, what is the main way that commercial banks create money? Okay, it's going to be something along the lines of it's probably going to say something like they take deposits and they issue when they have more than they need, or something along those lines. Now, from our discussion, we know that those two aren't 100% correlated, but for the purpose of kind of just the overarching idea, okay, they take deposits and they issue new loans. Okay, so that's how they're creating money. Do they need to hold a percentage of deposits as reserves? Yes, we do. Yes, they do. We know that in our Federal Reserve System that their required reserve ratio is 10%. I am going to let you go to the PowerPoint and look up how many Federal Reserve banks are in our system, or I'm sure a handy Google search would solve that in seconds. Okay, so what are the responsibilities of the Federal Reserve? Okay, there's a bunch of them. So it could be promoting full employment, could be promoting price stability, could be promoting economic growth, could be bank oversight. So there could be a number of these that are listed. I would stick to what the textbook says, and I think that'll help a guide in terms of selecting the right one. Okay, so they conduct open market operations. They deal with setting overnight interest rates, but they're going to be really, really straightforward. So stick to the text on that one, or stick to the PowerPoint. Okay, functions of the Federal Reserve are going to be very, very simple. It's going to be very similar to that last question. So you'll know that if you get one, you'll get the other. Yes, okay, we know that they also act as a lender of last resort. So that is one of their functions. Okay, so that's kind of helping you. Remember, there's always questions that are going to guide you in answering one that will probably help you guide another one. Does the Fed help to manage the economy by influencing interest rates? Yeah, of course they do, right? So they're one of their main tools they're doing is making sure that banks have enough reserves at their bank account at the Fed to support, a healthy lending economy. Okay, so they need to be able to know that they have adequate reserves so that they can continue to lend. So that interest rate is managed by what the Fed believes is the right pace of the United States government, for example. And so they'll try to target the interest rate that they think is the right interest rate for the promotion of full employment and the promotion of economic growth. All right. How do people respond to an increase in interest rate or decline? Okay, so if there's an increase in interest rate, they might stop holding money and they might start holding bonds. Okay, so if it makes more sense to have an asset that earns higher interest, okay, then they're going to want to get into that. Or they will not take, if they're looking for loans, they might not take out a new loan. A decline, obviously, the opposite. Okay, what does the Fed use open market operations for? Okay, so remember that this is when they buy and sell T-bills or treasury bonds from the commercial banking sector. And I think this question on the exam is probably going to be something like, to increase or decrease the amount of money in the economy. And that is partially true. Okay, I mean, if we had to kind of just say like, now we know more about that story, but we know that, yeah, I mean, yes, when they try to slow down the economy, they try to make it so that it's harder for banks to want to make loans and hence harder for them to buy reserves if they need them to meet their reserve ratio if they can't find it. Okay, so the opposite would be true if they were trying to speed up the economy to make it really, really easy. Okay, what's the discount rate? All right, so the discount rate is the interest rate that the Fed actually does absolutely control, and they change this rate depending upon the speed of the economy. So this is the rate that the Fed would charge banks if the banks wanted to go take a loan from the Federal Reserve, which doesn't usually happen very often. First and foremost, they go to that overnight market where they borrow from each other. Okay, so this one kind of obvious, like what would an increase in the required reserve ratio do? If they had to hold more reserves, it is a way to slow down the rate of lending. Decrease would allow banks to make more loans without finding as many reserves. Okay, and then similarly, what would a sale of government securities do to the money supply? Okay, so they're buying securities or they're selling securities to the banking sector. So that means banks are now holding on to an asset and they had to give up something to get that. They had to give up cash. Okay, so if the Federal Reserve is sucking up money from the private sector or from the banking sector, okay, then that is, in theory, it's decreasing the money supply. It is decreasing the money supply, but not in absolute control. And then if we had a purchase, so now they're buying these bonds from banks. Okay, well, they have to give them something. So the Federal Reserve gives the banking sector reserves in exchange. So they're increasing the amount of reserves in the system. How often does the Fed change the required reserve ratio? Almost never. Does the Fed hold gold? No, not really. Okay, that's not really what they do anymore. If they ever did, we used to have, Fort Knox and the federal government held gold, but no, the Federal Reserve deals with reserves, right? That's why they're the Federal Reserve. Okay, so categories. What is fiscal policy in general? Remember, there's really just two big arms here. There is dealing with discretionary policy, so it's spending in the private sector, buying things from the private sector, and it's changes in taxes. Okay, so they can either do spending programs or not spending programs, or they can increase taxes or they can decrease taxes. Okay, so it's the way to manipulate or to influence the economy, either moving faster or moving slower through government expenditures or austerity or increasing the tax rate or decreasing tax rates. Okay, so what are categories of fiscal policy? Kind of the same idea there. Okay, so it's taxes and it's also discretionary policy. Okay, what happens to government's spending, not pending, during recessions? Generally, what we see is they automatically start spending more because during recessions, we have all those automatic stabilizers. And so they start putting out more payments to people who claim for unemployment and people who need other assistance in those basic necessities of life. Okay, so what's the federal deficit? Oh man, shouldn't be too bad. Federal deficit is when their tax receipts are less than their spending. That's it. Okay. What should the government do to increase employment in terms of government purchases? Okay, if they want to increase the amount of economic activity in the economy, then they will make more government purchases. If they want to put income into the hands of people in the private sector so that they keep spending and respending and respending and respending, then they need to increase government purchases. Okay, so what's the federal debt? What's the accumulation of all those deficits? Okay, so every year, if there's a deficit, then it gets added as a piece of the overall federal debt. So this one should be clear now because we kind of just went over it. What will automatic stabilizers do to the deficit? Increase it, plain and simple. If we're in a situation where all of a sudden there's a downturn, that's not an expected part of the federal budget. And so if there's like a crisis in the middle of the year or something, then all of a sudden all those automatic stabilizers kick in. And if we were already in a deficit, then they would increase the deficit even more. Okay, so automatic stabilizers and types. I'm gonna let you go into the PowerPoint for that one. But remember, these are things like unemployment benefits and healthcare and child assistance, and I think we could also think of like could be programs related to, well, it's usually social programs. Where does money? Okay, so here's these three very easy, I think they're even true false questions about modern money. Where does money derive its value from in sovereign states? Typo. The fact that we have to pay taxes. So taxes drive the currency, or taxes drive the value. Do sovereign states require tax revenue to spend? No, we already realized this. They spend their money into existence and tax later on. How would anybody get the ability to pay their taxes if there wasn't spending first? In sovereign states, is the debt a burden on future generations? Students always want to think that this is the case, but no, you don't get a bill. You don't start when you're zero and and the federal government says, okay, here's your bill for however long you're alive. It's not how it works here. So no, and we also have to remember what the deficit or debt is financing. Okay, so if it funded some really really bad stuff, then in terms of like real life or real terms, then yeah, I mean it could be a burden, but generally we don't think that the actions of the federal government as they deficit spend are being done in malice. We hope that they're being done. I mean, that's really the hope, is that we hope they're being done to support current economic life, social life, and future social and economic life. So this should be a really easy test. I don't think you should be too worried about it. I would kind of go through these again and go through the study guide. You got me now saying it, but some of the things I might say might not. I don't have the test in front of me, so and I want you to go and look up the answers a little bit and go into the PowerPoint and go into your notes and go into the book. Okay, all these test questions are from the book, other than the last three. And I would like it if you would spend some time trying to get this in your own head rather than just kind of a pure memorization or even just like, hey, what did he say for this one? So take some time with it. You're going to be okay. And we will then pick up with some other topics about the macroeconomy, financial crisis, and kind of the overall, some of the policies that the federal government does beyond monetary and fiscal policy. So what kind of fiscal policies? We could talk about that. So we'll pick up with that for the last couple of weeks. And then your final exam will be pretty short. I think it's just on one chapter. Alrighty. I hope to be not so puffy on Thursday, but we shall see. Who knows? Sometimes this stuff takes forever. Okay, so see you soon. Good luck. Email if you have any questions or you would like to know any more.